Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Orla and I'm delighted to be joined by Chirag Patel from Patel Consulting, who'll be talking to you today about working with templates in Microsoft 365. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC22. Don't forget to check out the Resource Centre. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit SharePointEurope.com and click the content link at the top. Continue your learning by joining us February 15th for a webinar called Modern Approvals in Office 365 with Power Automate and Microsoft Teams. A big thank you to our sponsors, Pointfire and Docs42, who sponsor this webinar today.
Hey you! In the session you will see all about the great options of the Microsoft technologies. But what about generating documents in the Microsoft ecosystem? Like quotes, reports, emails, PowerPoints, and others. The challenges usually are many different data sources, an intuitive design in Microsoft Office, and of course generating the documents where the user needs them, in SharePoint, the Power Platform, Teams, or Dynamics. Docs42 can do all of it. Try now yourself.
Hi, I'm Martin from Pointfire. This year I was hoping to entice you with a booth, games, prizes, giveaways. Instead, we have this short video to show you how we make the multilingual page publishing feature even better. It's so easy, the demo only takes a few seconds.
With SharePoint's new feature, your staff still has to translate each page manually. By adding the Pointfire translator, the pages get translated automatically for your approval. Go to try.pointfire.com for a free trial or contact us for a demo.
Call for speakers for ESPC 22 is now open. For more information, go to sharepointeurope.com/submit speak ESPC. The European Power Platform Conference will take place in Berlin, Germany from the 6th to the 8th of April 2022. This is a brand new event aiming to help 500 plus IT pros, developers, and business decision makers harness the power of Microsoft Power Platform. Save €300 on your ticket with our super early bird sale that ends soon. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any question you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Centre, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And I'm going to pass you over to the webinar presenter, Chirag Patel. Hello, Chirag.
Hi, Ola. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Good to be here. So let's share the screen. Okay, great, excellent. So welcome everyone to the webinar at the ESPC 22 for short, I think. My session's about working with templates across Microsoft 365, and it's an opportunity for any type of user to learn about what there is to offer. And so I also want to thank the sponsors and also the ESPC 22 for giving me the opportunity to be here with you. So for those who are not aware, I'm Chirag Patel. I work with Patel Consulting here in London, UK, and I deliver various services around Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, albeit serving the document management, migration, deployment services. I'm a two-time certified with MVP as well as the MCT. And all that means basically is I work in the community, generally speaking, at various community events, all things about Microsoft 365, of course, and also try and keep up with the certifications because the platform constantly changes and all the technology and updates that goes with Microsoft 365. I'm also a M365 UK organizer. It's a community event that runs every month. So we got one next week on the 16th of February. I hope you can join us. So all the links you can find on my blog site, which is techchirag.com. And feel free to connect with me across social media and any queries or questions you have, or even if you would like to speak at M365 UK, then you're always welcome to do that. Okay, so that's enough of the intro. So where do we start with the Microsoft 365 templates? And it is worth just for the audience, especially to underline that different organizations use M365 platform in variety of ways. And certainly when I visit many organizations on various kind of projects that I work with, some use just purely for Microsoft Teams, some use it just purely for document management. And when you look at it from the other end, in terms of where we've come from, emails are still very heavily used because it is quick, responsive, and people still get their answers across the email. But obviously, it's not the only true collaboration in a sense like Teams. So this particular diagram you see here, which is from the Microsoft's website, and I've got the link over there. So it kind of gives you a good overview in terms of variety of ways you can have the adoption going with your organization in terms of how you use those services, whether that's using To-Do for managing your tasks, OneDrive for storing your personal, maybe your manager's one-to-one files, or even just SharePoint across, not just the intranet, but also, variety of files that you may store for projects, customers, and still be able to access all those files from Microsoft Teams and leverage Microsoft Teams further through your meetings and apps and chats, and being able to know what we know today, which is a true collaborative sense of Microsoft Teams. So gives you various perspectives around as an individual who might just use emails and maybe have some prescriptive way of communicating with third parties or even internal users, all the way into a cross collaboration using tools such as Yammer. And by the way, it's not just for big organizations, which is what I keep normally hearing. Any organization who's got E3 license can use Yammer, because Microsoft Teams sometimes is not always the answer for everything. So you got variety of tools, and your organization may have switched some of those tools, and some of them they may be blocked because you may not be ready yet to roll those out. So hopefully that gives you a flavor in terms of how you can kind of have productivity covering across the three different areas of individuals, teams, and organizations. So when you look at the templates, and whether that's your teams, whether you're working with a document, whether you're working with a set SharePoint site that may have preloaded folders or files, it really doesn't matter. But this is something I carry with me all the time, and I try to update as much as I can. And you can see that, when it comes across, when you talk about Microsoft 365, you're not just covering the likes of your daily apps that you use, like your Teams and SharePoint, but you've also got things like security and compliance. They come with a lot of templates. If you wanted to cover like your ISO 27001 framework, then you've got those templates with a set conditions and quality kind of assured conditions and criteria that you need to meet. All those comes with preloaded. You look at it the other end from from Teams and SharePoint, then you've got things like Microsoft Lists, which we know that it still uses SharePoint under the bonnet, if you like. So these are just some of the examples that you can see in terms of some of the templates you have available. Power Automate, I've deliberately left this blank because that just keeps growing and growing and growing. So we will see a lot of these demonstrations in a moment or so. And it's just kind of giving an overview that, if you're new to M365 or whether you're using part of it, then there is a lot more you can use. So you will see that also when you get the slides and afterwards, then there's links behind each of these boxes so that you can access all that information easily and be able to then pursue further on that. So we look at Teams, SharePoint, and the site templates, but there's also other areas of community work that happens, which is across the Microsoft 365 pattern and practices, which there are already solutions available for varying needs. And then you've got obviously the bot framework composers, so being able to create your bots with some of the readily available templates such as Q&A, and there are more templates through the use of Power Virtual Agents. So, depending on where you are in the organization, if you're looking after all the services, then this can be overwhelming for yourself. But if you're using just the Teams or SharePoint, depending on your administration architecture, then you may not use a lot of the other services. But certainly as a roadmap goes for your journey of Microsoft 365, then this is something to be aware of. So we're going to look at SharePoint first of all, and SharePoint's been around obviously many years now, and and specifically we'll be looking at SharePoint Online. There is a on-prem version, but that's not what we're going to be looking at today. Certainly, in terms of what you have available currently today with SharePoint, is the site templates, which you already get available to you from Microsoft with their own templates that you have, as well as the SharePoint lists or Microsoft lists for that matter. And those are also available in terms of the templates you can use. But what I wanted to cover in the first part of the demo for this particular area is some of the kind of actions you have available through SharePoint components and some of the settings. So it's not just about creating your lists, libraries, and the set dedicated columns, but you have also the advanced functionality in there. And if you're using something like content types, which have been around for many years, then you can actually have those things created, which is binding to your document libraries, which is where you store your files. So you can have those things available in a kind of a sequential kind of workflow manner, so that the user doesn't have to do all those things individually. It's a question of changing a site to a new site template, for example, and then being able to have all those things implemented. So this kind of gives you at least a view around the sort of things you can create, lists, columns, and so forth, but also being able to change your page look and feel as well. So being able to have your headers, footers on every page, for example. You can also, of course, join that with the Power Automate flows, so that if there is anything in there that you want to kind of trigger any conditions or actions, you can do that as well. And then obviously, for those who are kind of in the development area, this gets into more code heavy. But what we're going to look at for this part of the demo is purely from a PowerShell scripting perspective that's available, that any IT pro could just leverage that tool set and the code samples that's available in order to be able to build your own organization-specific template. So let's take a look at that. So here's my standard SharePoint site, and I'm using a Contoso organization as a demonstration environment. And for some of you, you might be familiar with that if you've come across some other demos. So here, what I'll see is, for example, sales and marketing. It's a team connected Microsoft Teams SharePoint site, and that's pretty much what we have at the moment. Standard menu on the left-hand side, few web parts, and displaying your files there. But the first thing we want to look at is being able to create our list. So the scenario here is that you have a user who's created a SharePoint site for sales and marketing, and you have a product list, which is a SharePoint list itself, which standard with standard columns you got. So you got your title, code name, products. So you got a set of different cameras, game controllers, and what have you. So standard list you have. But we all know that lists are reusable, especially if somebody's done some work on this and you want to be able to use that that list in another SharePoint site without having to recreate everything. So if I go and create a new SharePoint site, and then the aim will be here is to be able to take this list minus the data, of course, and take all those columns in different ways. And there are a couple of ways you can do that at the moment. So one is through the user ways. So if I quickly go back to SharePoint, create my SharePoint site, and I'll just create a communication site here, for example, and we'll call this ESPC 22 event site. Actually, let's call that. And then I'll just go ahead and create that SharePoint site as per that. So no customizations, no nothing, standard functionality, and then within seconds, you'll get your SharePoint site with the template that currently uses as a communication site template. So if I go and create new list, which is, the normal way you would do that is create your list. You can either create it from scratch or from Excel or existing list, or you can use any of these templates you have from Microsoft, or you can simply go from your organization tab. And if you've deployed any list templates, then they will become here. So any SharePoint site in your organization, they'll use a standard look and feel, if you like, for that template you may want to use. In my case, I've got nothing here, so that's fine. That's intentional. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a template based off that product list we saw in sales and marketing SharePoint site. And that's what we want over here. So we're going to hop over to our code. So this is PowerShell scripting you got here. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can still use PowerShell modules, PowerShell programs to write this script in here. And really kind of just few lines here is what I'm doing. So I'll walk you through now. So first line is obviously, you're connecting this through, my tenant as an admin credentials. And then obviously, my the link that I have is on that particular tenant. And then what I'm doing here is being able to extract the list that I want to be able to load in my organization-wide template. So all I'm saying here is running that PowerShell command, get SPO site script from list. And that list is the one that we had a look just now, which is that product list there from sales and marketing SharePoint site. So that's the full complete URL for being able to grab that. And then we're going to run two commands after that. Firstly is we need to load our script for that SharePoint site. So for that, we're going to call that ESPC 22 products. And description, this creates a product list so that it's more friendly in that way. And then what we're doing is grabbing all the columns and the list itself, all that into this one single variable called extracted. So load all that information. And then as a final step, we're just going to say add that to our list design repository, if you like, in terms of where the templates for that list will be held, which is that tab we had a look just now, which there is no template there. So all that's going to do is take that, and this is not going to be the true identity because we haven't run our script yet, but I've kind of spelled it out clearly here because I can do all that through variables and everything else. And then therefore I don't need to change that all the time. So what we're going to do is I've already run this credentials to be able to connect, so I'm not going to worry about that now. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run that particular command first. And then just run that script. So as soon as I've done that, then it's going to give me a new ID, which is that one, which is what we need to be able to load into our SharePoint site design. So I'm just going to copy that because our script has created, which is available in our SharePoint environment. And then in here, I'm just going to replace that to our new ID that we've just created. And then I'm going to just run that so that we can load our list template in there. So all I've done there is just essentially added that template based on that script repository. It's given me a few things in there. The key one to look at is things like the site ID that you have and your site, the title itself, which is going to be available for any SharePoint site to make use of. But you can see there in there as well, I've got thumbnail URL, logo URL. So I could have added more features to my script here as well, but I didn't bother with that at all, just to be able to run bare minimum, so that you can get this in your environment. So let's go over to SharePoint site. And so if I refresh this page, and we'll create the new list again, new list, and go to from your organization, Then there's my ESPCC 22 products, which is as expected we wanted. So I can just click on that, and you can see that, in terms of the columns it's going to create is those particular columns that I had in my sales and marketing SharePoint site. So I'll go ahead and create that, and then ESPCC 22 products, which is what I wanted to have loaded. Go ahead and just create that. Nice and simple. There's our list. Nothing in it because we didn't expect any data to come through. You could have done that if you wanted to, but that's through different means if you wanted to do that. This is just going to give you a pure template structure so that if I go and create a new product in here, then I've got my usual fields in here, but also it'll bring the drop-down options in that particular list that I had. And if for any reason in this SharePoint site here for ESPCC 22 event, if I wanted to take all that out, then I can just basically take cam photos out as well. So I can modify this list without affecting the other list. So hopefully that's kind of given you a quick view of how to create your template easily using that as a template. Now, some of you might be thinking, that's fine. What I did is, that's through PowerShell and everything else, but that's not the only way you can do it, because I could have done the same approach using the tools that's already available to me when I'm creating a list. So I could have still gone through this method of creating from existing list. And then in here, I could have seen that I can go into sales marketing, and there's my original list. So I can still create that. But for that, you will have to know that that product list already exists in another SharePoint. But if it's somebody new, they might not know where this list exists. So you're only making them available through that organization-wide list as well. Okay, so that's the SharePoint list side of things. The other side of things we want to look at is the SharePoint site template. So here, if I click on my settings icon for SharePoint site, and if I go into apply a site template, similar view to your SharePoint list, I've got ready-made templates available for the entire SharePoint site from Microsoft. But if I go into from your organization, nothing's there. So again, I can deploy a set of templates easily through the use of that simple PowerShell script that's available to us. Before I do that, what I want to show you here is that just for this SharePoint site, you only get standard SharePoint document libraries called documents. In our case, I've created that list just now, ESPC 22 products, events, site pages, nothing new there, and that's fine. So what we're going to look at now is our SharePoint site template, in which we use this existing site, but we're going to add some additional lists and the relevant columns and so forth into this SharePoint site without affecting anything else in this site. So that's probably another reason where you might want to have site templates deployed, so that if you have, for example, a project site, then you may want to have that template available for all your project sites with a standard list like risk and issues and so forth. So you could do that. So in this case, what we're going to do is go back to our Visual Studio Code, and this is the only area of the code that the rest of the session is not going to cover into any further coding. So bear with me on this one. So create site template is what we're going to do here. So if I go back to my site template, so here I've got the slightly long-winded way of JSON script, which I have. So everything's going to be loaded in my site script variable. And all I'm doing here is essentially a few actions. Firstly, I'm going to create a SharePoint list here called sponsor tracking, so that for our event site we want to be able to record all the sponsor information in there for who's going to pay for the events, for example. So I'm going to create that, and that's going to be based on a particular type of template. And these are all documented because, as you might know, SharePoint lists, when you create, they're based on different templates. And this standard one is a common list that we use, SharePoint list. So that's based on that particular number there. Then for the rest of the sections, all we're doing is saying, once we create our list, we're then going to create our attributes like description, field, such as sponsor name, requisition total, contact, meeting notes, etc., etc. And I could have done a lot more than that, except in terms of like being able to add a logo to the SharePoint site, add a flow to it. So that would have become a lot more bigger and much more usable in the sense that I can load all that information. And then similarly, like a SharePoint list that we just did, same sort of commands, except in terms of here, we're just going to run as a SPO site design instead of the list design. But the standard scripting that you're loading in your SharePoint environment is still the same there. So that's what we're going to run now. So firstly, I'm just going to highlight all that JSON scripting for being able to create, and then just create our SPO site script command there. So if I just maximize this window a little bit, so I can see that information there. So there I've got my new ID. So it's gone and created that script repository item. And then I'm just going to copy that and then paste it into my next line of PowerShell command here into that site script ID. And that's going to create my sponsor tracking site template itself. So I'm just going to run that now. So that's run now, and that's fine. So I'm happy with that. Similarly to lists, you can have your image URLs, all the other information around that particular site template when it's available there. So those are the common parameters there you see in there. So now all I'm going to do is go back to my SharePoint site and go into, let's go back to the home page. Actually, that's fine. I can stay here and go into apply a site template. And from your organization, there's my sponsor tracking SharePoint site template. So then I can just go ahead and just select that template. And before I run that, it's just going to say you're going to create a list or update existing list called sponsor tracking with sponsor name, contact, the fields that we saw in that JSON scripting. And then I'll say, go ahead and use this as a new template. So you can see the yellow bar appeared at the top. When I click on view progress, it's basically saying applying the site template. And similarly, all those actions is going to try and run into that environment. So that's fine. Our script has run because that yellow bar at the top has now changed from yellow to green. And then I'm just going to refresh this site here. Again, we didn't really apply any branding elements to this, so nothing's going to look different here, except what we're going to see now. If I go back to site contents, which is where I was before, then we'll have our new list added to here called sponsor tracking, like here. So that's created dynamically as part of the site template. And then when I click on that list, then I've got my columns that I wanted to have specifically within there. So at that point, I can just go ahead and enter my new sponsors information easily into this SharePoint site and have that available as a site template for entire organization. So pretty cool there for SharePoint in terms of what it can do as far as the templates in SharePoint is concerned. There is, of course, a lot more, the document templates for every library. You can do that. But we're not going to cover in this part of the demos there. But at least that's given you a lot more management capability that you can take care of your templates inside SharePoint. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. So there's a sample of the script site that I ran, so you get that, so at least you can run through that in your environment. So the next area we want to look at is the SharePoint, is the Microsoft Teams itself. So, pretty much with Teams, I mean, it's not just the Teams templates itself, but there's obviously the whole raft of other areas, the apps, the solutions that you get, and it can get obviously quite heavy itself. But what I've done here is kind of two areas I want to show you. Firstly, there's the great website we have with adoption.microsoft.com, as well as the Office Dev repository we have. So we're going to look at some of this in here. But what I want to kind of demonstrate here essentially is that all these community samples that you have are readily available for them to be used in your team's environment. And the good thing is you get that, which is nicely documented in terms of the setup, the deployment, screenshot by screenshot, and some of the code samples. So we'll look at the one code sample in there. But before we look at that, what I wanted to kind of just quickly show you is the ability to be able to manage your team's chat spaces that you create, those templates, and in terms of those policies where you can actually sort of configure in terms of what you can show and hide for your users. So let's head over there to our Microsoft Teams. So firstly, I'll just run Teams as an end user, in which I can create a team from here. So if I go in here, create a team, I can either create it like we normally do from scratch, or I can use an existing team that already exists, or I can use the templates that's available for me here. So you can see these are all Microsoft templates in there that you get. But what if you wanted to sort of show and hide some of these, things like you don't want bank branch or patient care, kind of if that's not in the industry you're in. So you can actually hide this ones here. So for that, and I appreciate, you may or may not have Teams admin privileges. If you know somebody who has, then you can easily actually guide them in terms of where that is. So for that, we're going to go over to our admin center. So go to Microsoft 365 admin, or I could have gone directly into Teams admin itself. So choose my Teams admin center. So in here, if I go into my Teams, and then I've got various options in my Teams admin center, but in particular, we want to look at is the Teams template and template policies. So this is where your team templates, chat space templates live. So there's your bank branch, patient care, and all the likes of it. You can of course add your own template by creating something from scratch, or use an existing team itself. But if we go with, say, create a new template, for example, and we can say maybe event, just call that event, and give a name, event management. Okay, see if that asks for it. US, that's fine. Let's leave it as US. Thought so. Let's click on next, and then you can choose, which channels you want. You can have those prescriptive channels like here. So we can maybe say sponsors, apply, and you can add your apps as well. So there are obviously a whole raft of apps in here. So if I go into, say, maybe planner, task by planner, that's fine. We can add that one. Maybe add SharePoint as well. SharePoint and so forth, and we can go ahead and just apply. So you can add a lot more apps to your content in terms of what you need as a basic team chats that you may want to create. So once you've done that, easy as that, you can create your own team templates in that sort of administration environment. And a lot of this you can still run in your PowerShell for Teams as well. So if you wanted to. So there's our kind of template. Now this takes some time. It's not going to be instant, so it can take a few hours before it shows up in your Teams chat space. But while that's doing that, so we know that we got our template that we just created in here called event. So that will obviously be taking care of that. But if I go into template policies, then in here I've got a single policy, a global policy here. And here I can then manage in terms of what should be viewable by users when they do create their teams. So instantly you can see that my event template is going to be available to them. So that's viewable. But if I then wanted to scroll down, I can hide the 3 other templates. So this obviously I ran an hour, 2 hours ago, but it's not taken effect yet. So that just kind of shows it's not instant change you get. But as a user, when they get to their Teams creation dialog, then they'll only get to see their 12 templates that they have there. That's in terms of the team templates, as far as you go with that in terms of being able to create for the set users and Teams templates. So something to watch out here is that if you're a collaboration administrator, then you've got two places essentially to manage your templates to control the governance and the control around what templates you use. So that's your SharePoint site templates and your Teams chat space templates itself. So with that, at least with that kind of understanding, you have good ability to then manage your templates through that way. Okay, so the next areas I want to show you is the admin center. So we're just going to step out of Teams and SharePoint, and we'll just go to other areas. Again, if you're managing users, and especially if you got contractors, temporary staff coming and going, or maybe even a different location of your organization, then you can manage your users in terms of how you provision them through the use of templates as well. So here, if I click on my active users, and I've got a sample of users in here loaded, and that's fine. But if I go into, once that's loaded up, I can go into here, which is what you see here, user templates. So in here, I can add my own template. So every time when I provision a user, it's going to use the set controls around the license allocation and so forth. So in here, I can go ahead and say add template. And I can go and say for my user template, I'm going to say this is going to be used for managing contractors' licenses. And we'll just say contractors, contractor, if I can spell it, and make this available to all the other admins, that's fine. So we will do that. And then I'll just use a single domain here, but you may have multiple domains. In that case, you may choose a particular domain. We'll let that auto-generate the password and forcing the user to sign in with a new password. And then I can choose the licenses that I want, or even the location based on where my user is going to be based for that. So I'll keep it as US. I'll choose the E3 as an example, but I can then go further down and then pick and choose if they should have maybe Teams, for example, and maybe just give them SharePoint if you like. So I can pick and choose as to which services they should have access to. I'll go ahead and do that, and then I can still say what other optional settings they may have. So you probably don't want to give them admin center access like Exchange or Teams admins. So we leave them as user, and then with profile info, you can get in a lot more kind of giving that attributes for every contract that creates. So I know some organizations, when I visit their AD side of things, they have department field populated just with the fact that saying is a contractor itself. So you may choose that if you want to do that, or just have standard information filled in there. But we'll leave that as blank, and then we'll just go ahead and create our template for that. So we can now go and create our new user. So if I click on user templates one more time, then this is where I can see my template is appeared for contractor, and I can manage my template through that as well. So I'll go ahead and create contractor there, and then I can just say Chirag Patel. That's fine, C Patel, and then go and say create do that. Template name is going to be contractor. If I had multiple templates, then multiple options would appear there, and I can go and create my user. Now in this demo environment, I only got 25 licenses, but you get the drift that it's easily I can then go and add that user based on that template for contractor. So that's one way of managing your templates through that users. The other area I want to look at is the security and compliance, which we talked about earlier briefly in terms of the ISO 27001 assessment if you wanted to make. So if I hover there, so Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, this is where you can see where your organization's scoring in terms of how compliant you are across different areas. So once that loads up, come on. Always take long when you do the demos. Yeah, okay, I got it. compliance manager, and it's going to try and load and give me all the dynamic results as it stands. Okay, good. So I've got that information there, and I've got in my compliance manager, the standard 5 areas I can look into, and you've probably spotted it here. So I've got my assessment templates in here as well. So something to bear in mind here is that, depending on what license you're using, E5 or E3, then some of those templates will be compliance centric there. But you can see here that, as my tenant goes, I've got all my templates for my compliance. I've got my EU GDPR, as well as I've got my ISO 27000 for Microsoft 365, or a universal template that there is. So that's a good one, because in this case, if you're going to manage, unless you have a separate department or business unit who's going to manage compliance, they may have some other tool set. But at least for Microsoft 365 is concerned, you've got all these readily available for you, so that you can create your templates based on those controls, which are all kind of the legitimate use of how you can verify in terms of your compliance across various controls and the relevant points you have within that, and being able to then mark that across. So it's kind of just another way to understand, templates are not all about the productivity side of things, but also it's available in security. And this is obviously one of many templates you have in terms of being able to manage your compliance assessments through that. So I wanted to kind of touch on that very briefly in terms of where you can create your templates for that. So once I've picked this particular template, I can just on the top right here go ahead and create this assessment, and then being able to give a name of the assessment, choose my relevant groups, and being able to then create my templates based on that. Okay, so that was our compliance center, and just final area before I kind of head for wrapping up is the Power Platform area. So that again, very huge area. You've got your likes of Power BI and Power Apps and what have you. So if I go over to Power Automate areas, so I'm just going to shut down this few tabs. Go back to my new item and go into Power Automate. Then again, a lot of you, even as end users, you might, you probably are using at least maybe some of the functionality you have available within here as an end user, or as a developer, or even the administrator to manage your messages, for example, in Microsoft 365. But when you come into templates, which is very hard to document because this just gets into so many areas, but you can see you can search them across, various. In this case, you've got all the various verticals, if you like, either the featured ones for remote work or approval, or simply just typing, say, for example, SharePoint. Then you're going to get all the Power Automate for your workflows templates across, covering at least SharePoint, if not more services, not just within Microsoft 365, but also the externals as well. So you've got those relevant templates, including one here for saving tweets that include a specific hashtag to your SharePoint list. So you can just kind of do all those things, or you can say simply find me all the templates for the ones that I'm able to do kind of tracking. So, in this case, you can track Microsoft Forms responses, which again, you get part of your license, being able to record that information in Excel, and also create a to-do task as well. So if I click on that, then you can see that, it'll give me a ready-made template. It's going to look for my connections that, as long as I've got the relevant licenses, and also being able to connect to these services here. So here's it's asking me for my to-do business. I'll go and do that. Create the notifications. So all those ticks, which is good. And then I can just continue further. So then I can get my canvas here, which basically is going to have all my readily available, the steps and the necessary actions that it's going to take in order to capture all the way from having response coming in my form, being able to get that information detail in terms of that response identification, and then being able to add a row into a table inside Excel with that sort of information there. So again, I won't go in any great detail there, but you can see that, here I can pick a form, and if I haven't got a form at the moment here, but then once you have that form available, the relevant information you can then populate. And you just have to multiply this across so many templates you have in order to take advantage of ready-made templates you've got available in this environment here. And again, that was just a quick example of the cloud flows you can create, which is the most common of the ones you can create. But there are obviously business process flows there as well. So if you've got this hooked up into your Dataverse or other areas or Dynamics 365, then you can create a kind of a process-based workflows in that as well. Wanted to cover this now very quickly there, and then if I just go over to just go back to the slides. It's just final bit is the PNP. Yeah. So if I, for those of you who haven't come across, this is a kind of a very thriving and growing and exciting folks who are working constantly on this from various organizations. And a lot of the stuff that I've shown you today was just out of the box what you get inside SharePoint. Some might code it, some of it is very limited. But when you look at Microsoft 365 pattern and practices community, a lot of it, it has its own PowerShell module, PNP PowerShell, in which you can then run some of these scripts that I've just run, albeit in a much more powerful and enriched way. So all those things are available. But specifically what I wanted to show here is the sample and solutions here. So it's not just for developers, in which you have here things like the SharePoint framework, web parts, and so forth. But if you look at the Teams app templates here, for example, then not only are you going to get access to all the templates you have in terms of like frequently asked question plus, icebreaker, all these other app templates you can use, but I can also go into the app template code samples as well. And specific, you can see there are a lot of samples templates you can use in order to kind of build this into your teams as app templates. The one I wanted to look at is the visitor one. So if I go and just find that visitor management. So if I go and click visitor management, because we're still in hybrid working mode and we are able to record some of the visitor information we get here, takes you into GitHub repository, and yes, you can download this as a zip, or you can actually kind of pull the changes as you wish. At the same time, being able to contribute in that environment as well. But the good thing about here is if you scroll down, then you got for every code templates, for every app templates you have, you got various consistent way of actually understanding how to deploy this in your environment here. So, in terms of documentation wise, you can see all those step-by-step screenshots, the features and what to do and how to get this implemented inside your teams. But also if I look into the deployment guide, then again, it gives me clearly step-by-step what to do, what dependencies there are as the prerequisites. So in this case, for visitor management, yes, I'll need to sign up for Power Apps, which is included in your current E3 or E5 licenses, Power Automate, as well as SharePoint Online. So tells you clearly before you kind of get stuck halfway through in building this, and then the rest of it kind of just goes through in more detail what to do or replace, in this case, channel ID with something like specific URL parameters. So may look technical, but it's very easy to follow, and I use it all the time for my customers in order to deploy some of these solutions in their team's environment. Of course, it is an open source community, so do recommend you test this in your test environment or even a demo environment. So if you sign up for the Microsoft 365 developer program, you get essentially a free tenant instance sandbox with populated content and teams database. So just look it up, Google it, or Microsoft 365 developer program. But the short one is M365 PNP, and you'll find all the information around that in here. Okay, I think that was it. So I could probably go on and on for a lot of these templates, but for me, I think it was important to kind of make you realize that there is a lot involved when it comes to managing simple out-of-the-box solutions and templates to be able to give more life to your your M365 environment. So we had a look at the add user template as well. So I think just want to say big thanks to each and every one of you. These are my details. techchirag.com is where you can get to me. I'm also speaking at various events in the next few weeks. The next one being Bletchley Park Collab Days in UK, followed by Teams Nation, which is a 100% community event. So hopefully I can see you or see you somewhere in these events. Yeah, I think with that, I think Ola and the team at the European SharePoint Conference, Azure, thanks for having me. And yeah,
thanks a million, Chirag. Just leave some time just in case there's some questions there now. So I have one question to start us off that came in, but just to say to anybody listening there, if you've got a question, there's still a bit of time. Go ahead and type it into the questions box now. The question we got in, Chirag, was, do any templates require any special license?
Good question. No, so in terms of what I've demonstrated, certainly from the SharePoint and the Teams side of things, the Teams chat space templates as well as the SharePoint site templates, those template works does not require any additional licenses. When you look at Power Platform, again, you got your standard, cloud workflows, or even in Power Apps with some of the solutions that you may have. Solutions are not essentially templates, but some of those things, like if you're using Dataverse to be able to create, they will require some additional Power Apps or the other licenses in that. But that's not so much around the template side of things, but more being able to build your solutions in there, in which you can either export your Power Apps as a solution package and then being able to import it in another environment. But that's your standard Power Apps functionality anyway. So in short, you don't need templates, the licenses for these templates.
Okay, thank you. Another question came in. How can we create a site from an existing site using this site as a template?
Yeah, so it's a bit like list functionality, isn't it? I think if I can remember correctly, there's no easy way of doing that other than to be able to run that particular command that you had. So if I go into here, being able to create, sorry, let's go back, sales marketing. If I go into sales marketing and if I click on settings, applying that site template, then you don't get that functionality here to say being able to use another site from that. So the only way you can do that is using the most commonest of the approaches, which a lot of the developers do, is something called the PNP provisioning engine, if you like. So you can take a copy of your entire SharePoint site with the contents in terms of the structures of it, and then create that through the PowerShell scripting. So that's PNP provisioning engine. You would use that.
Okay, that's great. There are no more questions there, Chirag. On behalf of the ESBC community, thanks so much for taking the time to do the webinar today. We really appreciate it.
No, it's great to be here. My pleasure. And yeah, I think I hope to see you and some of the folks hopefully at the conference. So yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Thanks a million, Chirag. So that's the end of today's webinar. Thanks everybody for joining us. Take care and goodbye.